Craigslist isn't usually my first choice when I need to buy something, but occasionally you can find really good deals on stuff that's normally quite pricey. At that time, I was on the hunt for some new gym equipment. Buying brand new weights and exercise machines can be really costly, so Craigslist seemed like a great option to find some second-hand ones for a lower price. For a few days, I browsed the website until I stumbled upon an ad that caught my eye. It was an offer for a set of weights at a really reasonable price, and it had only been posted a few hours before. The person who put up the ad was named Mary, so I shot her an email saying I was pretty interested in her weight set and would love to pick them up as quickly as I could. Mary got back to me in just a few minutes. She said she'd be available that evening after she returned from work at 7. It was a bit late, but I didn't mind much because I was eager to get the weights. We agreed on the time, and she sent me her address. Naturally, I looked it up to get an idea of the location and what her house looked like. It was about 20 minutes away in a small, familiar neighborhood. I remembered the area because a friend of mine used to live nearby. The house looked pretty normal and old, but nothing about it seemed off, or gave me a weird feeling. So that night, I drove over. The house was situated at the end of a street in a cul-de-sac. I parked beside their mailbox and walked up to the front door, which was already open. Not wanting to just barge in, I knocked on the open door a few times to announce my presence. Soon, a man appeared from the hallway. I explained that I was there to see Mary about the gym equipment she advertised on Craigslist. The man's expression brightened, and he invited me inside. He mentioned that Mary was just getting changed out of her work attire and would be down shortly. This made me a bit wary, but he seemed sincere, so I followed him into the living room. There, I saw the set of weights on the floor. What struck me was the emptiness of the room. No furniture, no decor, nothing. I guess he noticed me looking around because he quickly explained they were in the middle of moving, which was why they were selling the weights. I felt a bit uneasy, but decided to check out the weights anyway. As I inspected them, I noticed right away that some of the weight plates were missing. I questioned the man if what I saw was all there was, because the pictures online showed more. He offered a smile and suggested Mary might know where the rest were, but then he just stood there, staring at me. This made me feel really uneasy, so I asked him if he could go and tell Mary I was here. He paused for a bit before agreeing and headed upstairs. By then, I was starting to doubt if Mary even existed, so I listened carefully to hear if he was actually talking to someone. After a short silence, I moved closer to the stairs and peeked up. At the top of the stairs, the man was just standing there, gazing at the wall. It seemed like he was just pretending to go ask someone. I suddenly felt scared, realizing that this might all be a trick and I could be in a dangerous situation. I quickly made my way to the front door, trying not to draw the man's attention. But just as I turned to leave, I heard him rushing down the stairs, shouting for me to wait. I didn't stop. I ran out the front door and got into my car. Oddly enough, as I drove off, I saw the guy come out and run around the side of the house. I didn't stop driving until I was well out of the neighborhood. Then I pulled over and called the police, telling them everything that happened. I wasn't sure what the man's intentions were, but it was clear he was up to no good. Later, the police visited me at my house for more details. They informed me that the house where I met the man had been empty for over a year, which sent shivers down my spine. Unfortunately, all I could provide them was a description of the man. The police only had the weights left in the empty house as a clue, possibly with his fingerprints on them. It's unsettling to think that he might still be out there, using abandoned houses to trap people. But at least I managed to escape before he could do whatever he had planned. After finishing college, I was in need of a small, affordable place to live while I looked for a new job. I had been working part-time at a local grocery store, and now that my studies were over, it was time to find something better. Renting an apartment by myself was too expensive, so I was mostly searching for rooms to rent in other people's homes. Living with strangers was going to be a bit uncomfortable at first, but I didn't really have many other options. A friend from college recommended I check out Craigslist. Unlike other websites at the time, Craigslist allowed people to list individual rooms in a house, which was exactly what I needed. There seemed to be a lot of choices on Craigslist, so I decided to search there. After a couple of days, I started to feel discouraged because no one was responding to my inquiries. or they would just say the room was already taken. Then, on a Saturday morning, I saw a new listing. It was close, affordable, and seemed nice. The ad, posted by a guy named Tom, described a big house with an available bedroom that had its own bathroom and closet. This seemed ideal, so I emailed Tom to express my interest before heading to work. The listing was fresh that morning, so I hoped I was the first to reach out. During my lunch break, I checked my email and saw that Tom had responded, inviting me to see the room that afternoon. Despite knowing I'd be tired after work, I really wanted the place, so I agreed to meet him. The drive took just 10 minutes. The house looked great from the outside, just a typical home in a regular neighborhood. I parked on the street and walked up to the front door, knocking gently. When there was no answer after 30 seconds, I knocked a bit louder. Just as I was about to text Tom, he opened the door and welcomed me inside. He was sweating profusely, as though he'd been exercising hard, and he didn't smell very pleasant. I didn't want to be impolite, so I didn't mention it. He started showing me around the main floor, pointing out the kitchen and living room. He mentioned that he rarely used these rooms, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting in his way. Looking around, I noticed the rooms didn't match the pictures from the ad. The sink was full of old dishes, and the couch was stained. It was odd because the house looked spotless in the photos. I remember seeing a brown leather couch in the pictures, but the one there was black. I guess Tom used old pictures from when the house was first sold. It was misleading, but I was more concerned about the room I'd be renting, which was upstairs. Tom led me to the stairs and gestured for me to go up first. I felt uneasy as I climbed the stairs alone, with Tom staying at the bottom, smiling and directing me to the first room on the left. As I reached the top, a soft thud came from behind the door of what was supposed to be my room. Looking down, I saw Tom's smile had vanished. I asked if someone else was living there. He sounded annoyed as he explained it was just a friend staying over and encouraged me to see the room. I was really nervous by then. I wondered why he hadn't mentioned someone else being there. It seemed like important information. I just wanted to leave. Trying to sound confident, I went back downstairs, telling Tom the place wasn't right for me. He blocked the stairway, looking displeased. Standing a few steps away, I insisted I needed to leave. He asked me to at least see the bedroom, but I refused again. Surprisingly, he then smiled, stepped aside, and let me pass. I hurried out the front door, feeling something wasn't right about the house. I felt fortunate to have left so easily. I'd thought I might have to push my way out. A few hours later, I checked Craigslist and the listing was gone. I still wonder about that room and what was really going on there. It might have been empty, but I suspect it was something much more unsettling. For a few years in college, I shared a house with a buddy I'll call Jake. Originally, Jake was my dorm mate during our first year. Later, we decided to leave the dorm and rent a house together since we both had jobs that paid okay. It was our first time managing a house budget, so we were pretty new to it all. Things were fine for a while, but after about a year, we realized that the house costs were really draining our savings. We had to choose: move out or find another person to live with us. We liked the place, so we opted to look for a new housemate. First, we asked our friends, but no one was interested. Our only choice left was to advertise online. I put an ad on Facebook Marketplace and Jake used Craigslist. We'd never looked for housemates online before, so it was a bit odd for us, but we needed to do it. A few weeks passed with only a couple of replies, but then Jake showed me an email from someone named Chris, who responded to his Craigslist ad. Chris seemed okay. He was a bit older, having just finished college, but he was friendly and tidy. He agreed to the rent terms and moved in the following week. For the first few months, Chris hung out with us quite a bit, and we got to know him. Suddenly, though, he became very private. Jake and I hardly saw him, and he hardly spoke when we did. He spent most of his time in his room, only coming out for food or to go to work. I wasn't upset, just found it odd. After 4 months of Chris living with us, things started to get worse. I came home from work one day, and right away, Jake quietly called me from the living room. As I entered the living room, Jake whispered that Chris was in the house, so we should keep our voices down. He then mentioned a really bad smell he noticed near Chris's room. I hadn't smelled anything, but he urged me to check it out. I tiptoed down the hallway, and without getting too close, I could smell it. It was horrible and unfamiliar. I had no clue what it could be, as I'd never smelled anything like it in our house before. Jake thought we should ask Chris about it, and I agreed. We both went to Chris's door, trying not to breathe in the stench, and knocked several times, calling his name. No response. Jake was sure Chris was inside, but after waiting a bit more, we decided to ask him the next day. By then it was late, so Jake and I quickly made dinner, watched some TV, and then went to bed. The following day, I caught Chris as he was leaving and asked about the smell. He just said he was taking out the trash and hurried off. His answer didn't make much sense, but I didn't want to push the issue. Later, I told Jake about it. He also found it strange but didn't know what we should do, so we just let it be. Weeks passed. Chris continued to keep to himself, but thankfully the bad smell was gone. One night, I got home late from work. Jake and Chris were probably already asleep, so I went straight to my room and fell asleep too. In the middle of one night, I was jolted awake by sounds coming from below my room, where Chris's room was. I strained to hear what he was doing, but eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, Chris rushed off to work as he usually did. However, he didn't come back that night. After a few days, he still hadn't returned. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail every time. Jake and I were getting worried, so we decided to check his room for any hints about what might have happened. His room was a mess, with many of his things seemingly packed and gone. Strangely, I found a pair of glasses in his drawer, even though Chris never wore any. He left behind some clothes and all his furniture, which suggested he hadn't planned to leave for good. We called the police to report Chris as possibly missing, and an officer came that night to investigate and ask us questions. We explained everything and showed the officer Chris's room. Jake even gave him a photo of us with Chris from when he first moved in. A week later, a detective informed us that the man we knew as Chris wasn't actually Chris. A family recognized him from the photo as their missing son, who had disappeared almost a year ago. The case became more complex from there. The man had lied about everything, so we couldn't provide much useful information. Eventually, we stopped receiving updates. All we knew was that the man was someone who had lived with his parents and then vanished without a trace. He never returned to our house, and I don't know if he was ever found. It's the strangest and most unsettling experience I've ever had. The thought of living with someone who had fabricated their entire identity and was officially missing is chilling. It's hard not to think that this man might have been hiding from the law for something he had done or was involved in. I don't often use Craigslist, maybe only once a year, but it's sometimes the quickest way to sell stuff that's tough to get rid of. But 3 years ago, something happened that made me swear off Craigslist for good. I was 22 then, living in a really tiny house with a buddy. We'd been roomies for more than a year, but then he moved out. Our lease was almost up and I couldn't afford the place alone. So, I had to find a new spot. I ended up in a much smaller apartment, which meant I had to ditch most of my furniture. The sofa, barely used, was something my friend and I got when he first moved in. It was pricey, so I didn't want to just leave it on the curb. Needing cash for my move, I turned to Craigslist. This was my first time selling anything there. I was usually the buyer, which sometimes felt weird, meeting strangers in their homes. But selling from my place felt safer. After about 2 weeks, someone seriously interested messaged me. He called to ask about the couch. The call was reassuring. His name was David, and he needed cheap furniture for his new house. I explained that I was doing the opposite, leaving a house for an apartment. He asked why, and I shared that I couldn't afford it after my roommate left. He seemed friendly, and I ended up telling him more than I planned. We agreed to meet on a Saturday evening after work, around 6 p.m. I left the front door open and waited on the sofa. After over an hour, I thought he wasn't coming and went to make food. But then, just minutes later, the doorbell rang. At 7:30, I was pretty annoyed, but tried to look happy when I opened the door. "Hey, I'm David," the guy greeted, offering a handshake. He was tall and big with a huge smile. I shook his hand and showed him to the living room. He just nodded at the couch, looking okay with it. Then I heard more footsteps and saw two other guys come in. "Sorry, these are my pals. They're moving in with me," David said. I was nervous but said it was okay, even though I felt uneasy. I kept telling myself I was just worrying too much, but I couldn't shake the feeling. David went around the couch, bending down like he was checking something, then stood up again. "What's this here?" he asked, pointing to the couch's side. With his friends behind me, I hesitantly joined him to look. "I don't see anything," I said. He pointed again, making me kneel down to look closer. The two guys moved in front, and David was behind me. Kneeling there, not seeing anything, I felt their presence looming over me, making me feel really scared. Then David laughed. "I'm just joking. There's nothing." He clapped me on the back as I stood up. I laughed nervously and moved away a bit. The two guys with David had unsettling grins, looking at him as if they were planning something. I was trying to stay cool, stuck in my own house with them. I couldn't just walk out, and I was too afraid to ask them to leave. "So, do you like the couch?" I asked, wanting to hurry things up. David glanced at his buddies and then at me, his smile gone. Suddenly, everything went silent, and David's eyes seemed empty. Out of nowhere, one of the guys tackled me down, pinning me hard. I tried to fight back, but he was too strong. I stopped resisting, just hoping not to get hurt worse. Meanwhile, David and the other guy ransacked my house, grabbing anything valuable and making a huge mess. The guy holding me down was pressing my face into the wooden floor, his full weight on me. Soon, David called out from the door, and the guy got off me and they all ran out. I heard their truck drive away fast. Lying there, shocked and hurting, I finally got up and locked the door. I called the police right after. Obviously, David wasn't his real name, and the email and phone number he used were fakes. The cops found some fingerprints and shoe prints, but couldn't find any suspects. Turns out, the same shoe prints were at another house a few weeks back, in a similar robbery. It seems they target people living alone, and I had told them I was in that exact situation. This whole thing left me really stressed and angry. I thought I was safe in my own home, but I was wrong. Craigslist can be risky, and we need to be careful about inviting strangers into our homes. A while back, I decided to buy a pickup truck from an online marketplace. Now, don't jump to conclusions. It was a really good deal, and my money situation wasn't exactly great. I hadn't used this website much before, but I knew it as a normal spot where people sold their things, often at low prices. Even with these low prices, I had to borrow some money from my dad because I didn't have enough in my bank account to pay for even an inexpensive vehicle. After looking around on the website for a bit, I sent a message to a guy who was selling his pickup for $4,000. He replied quickly and answered all my questions, sounding pretty honest. He said the truck wasn't the best in looks, but it was reliable for getting around. Interested, we agreed to meet at a fast food place about halfway between where we both lived. I got there first, taking a cab, and he arrived about 5 minutes later. We talked for a while, and he explained more about the truck, mentioning some small problems he had with it before, but nothing major. Given my tight budget, I couldn't be too choosy. Naturally, I wanted to test drive it. He suggested a quieter parking lot nearby for the test drive. I thought that was fine, and as I was about to call another cab, he said it was just over the road and we could go together. I didn't want to seem impolite, and since I was new to this, I assumed it was normal. In hindsight, I should have been more cautious, but I was young and he was older, which made me trust him for some reason. As I got in the truck, he asked if I had my driving license with me, which made him seem more trustworthy. He did drive a bit further than just over the road, actually a few blocks away from the fast food place, to a deserted parking lot off the main street. That was the first real warning sign, though it probably should have been the second or third. "Your turn to drive," he said, stopping the truck. As we walked around the vehicle to switch places, he tossed the keys towards me, shouting, "Catch!" But they landed far from where I was standing. I'd have had to leap onto the hard ground to catch them. Feeling a bit silly, I went to pick them up, but just as I bent over, I suddenly felt a hard kick on my side. The next thing I knew, he was over me, quickly pulling my wallet from my back pocket before running back to the truck. I quickly picked up the keys, thinking maybe he left them in a rush, and I could negotiate to get my wallet back. Sadly, the keys he threw were just decoys, and he drove off, leaving me all alone there. The worst part was, it all happened so fast, I didn't even catch the truck's license plate number. Luckily, I still had my phone. The first thing I did was cancel my bank card, because I couldn't afford him spending my limited funds. Then I called the police. I walked back to the fast food place and waited there to give my report, but with just a vague description of an old white truck and an ordinary middle-aged man, they couldn't do much. He had removed the online ad, and his email didn't even use a real name. It was just some video game character's name. And again, I didn't get his license plate number. So in the end, I lost $4,000 in cash, had to wait for a new bank card, get a new driver's license, and they never caught the guy. The lesson here is, be careful with online marketplaces like this one, and don't make the same naive mistakes I did. Once upon a time, I worked for a well-known housekeeping service. However, I left when a former colleague revealed she was earning 3 times more by working independently and advertising on Craigslist. Intrigued, I ventured into the same path. For about 7 months, I enjoyed earning a fantastic income until an eerie encounter occurred, unlike any I had experienced before. I hope never to meet someone that unsettling again. My routine involved responding to emails from potential clients about house cleaning. They would specify the rooms needing attention, and I'd estimate the cost based on the time required. To prepare a quote, I'd either visit the home or review a video walkthrough sent by the client. This process was similar to the one at my former employer, but my rates were more affordable, and clients preferred having the same person regularly. A man sent me a video of his already tidy house, a common scenario with clients who aim to maintain cleanliness. We agreed on a date and time, and a few days later, I arrived for my first cleaning session. The plan was to clean both floors, excluding the basement, for about 3.5 hours, with special attention to the kitchen and bathroom tiles. Upon arrival, he welcomed me and led me upstairs to start from the top. That's when things turned sour. As I cleaned, I expected him to leave the room, but he just stood there, watching me. Sometimes, older women who are particular about cleaning do this, but this man wasn't observing my work. His focus was on me. I asked if he needed anything else done, and after a pause, he said something unsettling. He mentioned that seeing my ad on Craigslist made him feel compelled to hire me. Initially, I didn't interpret this as flirtatious. I, a Mexican woman, assumed he, an older white man, was stereotyping my cleaning abilities. I was used to such ignorance, he wouldn't be able to watch me anymore. I just needed to finish my work, get my payment, and make sure I never returned to this place. Next, I moved to the connected bathroom. About 20 minutes into scrubbing, I sensed someone watching me again. Turning around, I saw him in the doorway. "Sorry to disturb you," he said. "Please don't clean the vanity. It belonged to my wife, who passed away back in 2009. I replied with a simple, "Okay." After an awkward pause and his lingering gaze, he finally left. I wondered why he hadn't just asked me to avoid the vanity in his initial instructions. While cleaning around it, I noticed some makeup items that were released after 2009. It was 2017, but he said his wife died in 2009. These makeup products were no older than 2015, and I knew because I remembered their release. If the vanity had truly been untouched since his wife's passing, it would have looked much older. Now, I was really uneasy. Fortunately, he didn't bother me anymore while I was upstairs. However, the thought of cleaning downstairs filled me with dread. But I had to get it done. In the kitchen, I noticed the living room was visible and oddly devoid of pictures. I've cleaned countless homes and always saw at least some photos, even in houses where someone lived alone. This absence of personal touches was unsettling. Just as I resolved to finish quickly and reduce his fee, he showed up in the doorway, asking if I could do him a favor. I hesitated, then asked what he needed. He explained he had forgotten to mention the basement. Although it wasn't included in the job, he wanted it quickly vacuumed because he was expecting guests next week. I mentioned my tight schedule and suggested I could do it next time. He then proposed I skip the dining room, which was rarely used, and clean the basement floors instead. I offered to return the next day to clean the entire basement, not just the floors, trying to delay it. But then, his behavior shifted alarmingly. He insisted on having the basement floors cleaned today, mentioning he and his wife needed it done. His wife? The one he said had passed away years ago? At that moment, I sensed something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. I said I'd see if I had time. He then asked if he could show me the basement quickly. Realizing he wouldn't let it go, I pretended to receive a phone call and stepped away. I called my friend in Spanish, hoping he couldn't understand, and explained the situation. She agreed to come over and ensure my safe departure. I returned and lied about a family emergency, saying I'd come back tomorrow to finish. His reaction was cold and dismissive. He went upstairs as I packed up, knowing I wouldn't get paid, but relieved to leave. My friend arrived as I was loading my car, and the man watched me from the window. Once home, I called the police. They couldn't do much as he hadn't broken any laws. He was just unsettlingly creepy. They advised me not to return, which I had already decided. This experience is a cautionary tale for anyone offering services through platforms like Craigslist. It's hard to know who's strange and who's not. Always trust your instincts, inform someone of your location, and have a planned departure time. I still wonder what that man's intentions were in the basement, and I hope no one else has to find out. I was using an online platform, Craigslist, to sell some items I no longer needed in my home. I was planning to move soon, so I was sorting through my belongings to figure out what to keep and what to let go. That's when I stumbled upon my old motor tools. Although they were of high quality and still worked well, I had recently replaced them with battery-operated ones. Since I had no further use for the old ones, I decided to sell them. I took a few photos and posted them on Craigslist for sale. In my post, I listed a power drill, a driver, and a complete tool set for $80. Considering their good condition and functionality, it was a great bargain. It didn't take long before people started showing interest. Within an hour, I received 2 responses. One person offered me $50, but I politely declined, holding out for a better offer. The second response was more promising. The person expressed keen interest and wanted to buy the tools for the full price I had listed. They even wanted to pick them up that very night. I agreed and told them I was available at 5 p.m. Whenever I sold items, I never let strangers into my house. I would meet them in my driveway, a safe and public space in our busy neighborhood. I planned to be in the driveway a little before 5 p.m., with the tools ready to make the exchange quick and smooth. However, at around 4:30 p.m., I heard a knock on my door. Looking out, I saw a man with a red car parked in my driveway. Opening the door slightly, I asked who he was. He introduced himself as the buyer from Craigslist and acknowledged his early arrival. I asked him to wait in his car, as I wasn't quite ready yet. He seemed a bit hesitant, which felt awkward, but eventually, he returned to his car. I then gathered the tools and met him at the top of my driveway, where I had an outdoor outlet for him to test the tools. While testing the drill, he suddenly offered $20, a significant drop from the agreed-upon $80. I was polite but firm, stating that while I could lower the price a bit, $20 was unacceptably low. I was slightly annoyed since he had initially agreed to the full price. He placed the drill down and left without another word, driving off in his red car. I felt a mix of confusion and frustration, feeling like I'd been tricked and my time wasted. I brought the tools back inside and tried to move on from the incident, considering it a minor inconvenience, or so I thought. Later that evening, as I passed by the front window, I caught a glimpse of that same red car lurking outside. The mysterious red car was parked a short distance away, just 3 houses down from mine. Peering out, I tried to see if the same man was inside, but the car was empty. Unsure, I shrugged it off as a mere coincidence and continued with my evening. An hour later, as I was relaxing at home, cooking and watching TV, there was a knock at my door. The knock unsettled me, but I decided not to answer, hoping the visitor would leave. Thoughts of the earlier encounter with the man buying tools raced through my mind. Barely half a minute passed before another knock sounded. "Hey, it's me! I've decided to buy the tools. I've got the cash!" a voice called from outside. I didn't trust his words. It dawned on me that the red car I had seen earlier must have been his, and he had been lurking around my house all this time. I chose not to respond and instead called the police, giving them a description of the man in his car. He continued calling out, insisting on buying the tools, but then fell silent. I stood frozen near my couch, eyeing the front door anxiously. Minutes ticked by. With the police on their way, I mustered the courage to peek through the window next to the door. Suddenly, there was a loud thud against the house, followed by the sound of rustling leaves and retreating footsteps. Looking out, I saw the man limping towards his car. That's when the police arrived, intercepting him halfway. To my shock, he confessed to quite a bit. He admitted that his intention was to rob me. His plan was foiled by my refusal to let him into the house. He even attempted to climb a tree next to my house, aiming to jump onto the roof, but missed and injured his leg. More alarmingly, he was armed with a knife and had aimed for a window on my second floor, which I later realized was unlocked. If he had managed the jump, he could have entered my home. He insisted it was only an attempted robbery, but his actions suggested otherwise. After this incident, I completely stopped using Craigslist. To this day, I am extra cautious, ensuring all windows in my house are locked, even those I previously thought were out of reach. Long ago, I searched on Craigslist to find a room to share. My goal was to find a house where I could live and share the rent with a roommate or a few roommates. After about a week of looking, I finally found a place that seemed right for me. I had several chats with the landlord, who was also going to be my roommate, before deciding to move in. This landlord, who I'll call Bob, appeared to be a very ordinary and friendly person, around the same age as me. Bob explained everything about the house and what I should expect living there. We seemed to get along quite well. With everything looking good, I was very excited. I didn't own a lot of things, so I quickly packed my stuff and put it in my car's trunk. A few days later, I drove for half an hour to what would be my new home. The house was a bit away from the city, surrounded by forest. The driveway to the house was long, stretching away from the main road. However, when I arrived, the house wasn't what I had imagined. It was an ancient wooden house, clearly over 100 years old. I remembered Bob mentioning it was his parents' old house, but I was surprised by its age. The photos on Craigslist showed a modern interior, so I guess they must have renovated it significantly. Leaving my belongings in the car, I walked to the door and knocked. Bob welcomed me and gave me a tour. Despite the exterior's aged look, the inside was a stark contrast. Clean, well-kept, and obviously recently updated. I was pleased with it and moved my stuff in that same evening. Everything was fine for the next few days. It hardly felt like a place I'd found on Craigslist. It was more like living with a friend. Bob worked in the city, so he was out most of the time. I worked remotely, so I often had the house to myself. But there was one exception. There was this one door that was always locked. I didn't think it was my place to ask Bob about it, so I never did, but it made me curious. It probably led to the basement, which was strange because Bob had mentioned the house was just one story and didn't say anything about a basement. A few more days passed, and then something unusual happened. Bob came back one evening with some fast food for dinner, and then headed to bed early since he had work the next day. I stayed up for a bit longer and then went to bed myself. But lying there, I found it hard to fall asleep. It was just one of those restless nights. After a while, I heard Bob's bedroom door open. With nothing else to do, I lay there listening. But there was no sound for a couple of minutes. Then I heard him start to walk down the hallway towards my room. As he got close, he stopped. There was a creak in the floorboards and a soft thump, like he was leaning against my door. He stood there for a long time. I'm not sure how long it was, but then he walked away, not back to his room, but towards the main hallway. I heard a door open and close. This left me puzzled. It was odd and a bit creepy, but I had gotten to know Bob and didn't think of him as strange. I wondered what he was doing and where he went. I stayed up as long as possible, waiting to hear him return, but he didn't. Over the following nights, I noticed this happen regularly. Every night, about half an hour after I went to bed, Bob would leave his room, pause by my door, then head to the locked door. He never seemed to sleep in his room. He always went behind that locked door. It was unsettling how he kept this a secret. One night, I decided to figure out what was going on because I was starting to feel uncomfortable. I pretended to sleep and waited for Bob's usual routine. He left his room and walked towards mine. As soon as I heard him unlock and open the other door, I quickly got up and stepped into the hallway, catching him by the open door. He turned, obviously surprised. "Hey, is everything okay, Bob?" I asked. He just looked at me, eyes wide, startled by my sudden appearance. "Why do you always go to that door every night?" I broke the silence, feeling impatient. We stood in the long, dark hallway, facing each other. I sensed something wasn't right with him. We continued to stare, and I took a step forward. "Bob." As soon as I said his name, he sprinted around the corner to the back door, flung it open, and ran into the trees. I watched him vanish into the dark forest, my heart racing, shocked by what just happened. I couldn't even begin to understand the flood of thoughts in my head. I shut the back door, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and approached the door Bob had opened. It led to a basement, dark and unrefurbished compared to the rest of the house. The walls were made of old, decaying wood. I hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. The longer I stood there, the more scared I got. Eventually, I rushed back to my room, quickly packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into my car, and drove off, never once looking back. I never heard from Bob again, nor did I try to contact him. I had no idea what was happening with him or what he was doing in that house, but I wanted no part of it. Eventually, I pushed the incident out of my mind. But nearly 5 years later, curiosity resurfaced. I looked up the house online and discovered some unsettling information. The house had been demolished years earlier. An article, dated just a few months after I left, reported the house as abandoned. This suggested that after Bob ran off that night, he never returned. I read on and learned that the house was demolished due to what was termed criminal findings. The details of these findings weren't disclosed. This revelation left me deeply disturbed for weeks. Such incidents seem unlikely these days, but one can never be too cautious. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and this event took place 3 years back. Recently, I had moved into a small house in my hometown. After living in a flat for several years, I didn't own much furniture or big decorations to fill up my new place. I had a good-sized sofa and a place to put a TV, but the only TV I had was quite small. I planned to set it up in my bedroom. As I was on a tight budget, I decided to look on Craigslist for a bigger TV for my living room. While searching, I came across several nice flat-screen TVs. However, they were all more than I wanted to spend and, honestly, fancier than what I needed. My main goal was just to get a big TV to make my living room feel less empty. The quality of the picture wasn't a big deal to me. Finally, I stumbled upon one that seemed just right. It was affordable, big, and apparently worked fine. It was an old model flat screen, about 10 years old. By today's standards, it wouldn't really be called a flat screen, as they are pretty thick and heavy. I emailed the seller and kept looking, but didn't find anything else interesting. I was really hoping this TV would work out. The next morning I got a reply. The seller, Mitch, seemed overly eager to show me the TV, which felt a bit odd, but I guessed he might just be a cheerful older guy. I told him I was free any evening after work at 6. He suggested the next day at 6:30 p.m. and sent his address and a Google Calendar invite labeled Craigslist TV. I accepted it, though it seemed unusual. I cleared out my truck, and after work the next day, headed to his place. It was dark by then, and his house was all lit up when I arrived. I double-checked I had the cash, then walked up to his front door. I noticed the door was slightly open. There was no screen door, just the main one. I thought he might have left it open for me, so I peeked inside but didn't see anyone. I rang the doorbell and heard a noise from the back of the house, then silence. That noise made me feel uneasy. I was about to leave due to a bad gut feeling when I heard footsteps. The door then opened a bit more, revealing a man who was partly hidden behind it. "Need something?" he asked, only half visible. "Oh, right. I'm here to see the TV we arranged to check out at 6:30 today," I replied, noticing the man's odd behavior. He seemed different from our email exchange, less cheerful, more serious, and quite big and grumpy for a middle-aged guy. Despite feeling uneasy, I followed him inside. The TV was just next to the entrance, so he stood by while I quickly glanced at it. "Looks good, I'll take it," I said hastily, not even sure if it worked. I just wanted to get out of there fast. I handed him the cash. He paused, looking at the money, then at me. He grabbed it, shoved it in his pocket, and suddenly pushed me towards the door, telling me to get out. I didn't wait around. I ran to my truck and sped off. A little later, I pulled over and called the cops to report the robbery. It seemed so foolish of him to rob me at his own place and let me go, especially since I knew where he lived. But when the police investigated and called me back, I was stunned by what they said. The story unfolded over the next week. The guy at the door wasn't Mitch. The real Mitch, the homeowner, was found knocked out in his kitchen. He was hurt but alive, thankfully. The man at the door was actually another person Mitch was selling kitchen items to on Craigslist. He had attacked and robbed Mitch just before I arrived. The craziest part? Mitch had also sent a Google Calendar invite to this guy, who accepted it. His email, which was his full name, led to his quick arrest. During the investigation, I finally met the real Mitch. He was indeed a cheerful older man, despite the ordeal he went through. One day, I found an ad on Craigslist for a really nice old piano that was super cheap. I'd been looking for one for a long time, and these kinds of pianos are usually super expensive. I emailed the person selling it, and he got back to me really fast. He was super nice and couldn't wait to show me the piano. The place he wanted to meet was kind of out in the countryside, away from the city, but I didn't think it was a big deal. On Thursday night, I got in my car and drove to the address he gave me. It was dark, and the roads were twisty and a bit scary. I started to feel a bit nervous. When I got there, the place looked like an old church. I wasn't sure if it was a church or a farmhouse because they all looked the same to me. A man came out of the church, waving and calling my name. I felt a bit scared, but got out of my car and walked towards him. He was really tall and skinny, with small, dark eyes and a strange smile. He seemed nice, but something about him felt weird. He said hello and hoped I didn't have a hard time driving there. I nodded and tried to calm down. He took me inside, and it looked like an old church turned into a place where they keep lots of musical instruments. There were drums, guitars, banjos, and more on the walls. But I didn't see the piano. I asked him where it was, and he said it was downstairs. I felt a bit uneasy about how he said it, but I followed him anyway. We went down a narrow hall to a staircase that went down. He took a big flashlight and we went down the stairs. He smiled weirdly and said the piano was down there, in a small room. I wasn't sure if I should go in, but I felt like I had to keep going. I went into the room with the man. He switched on some dim lights, and there was the piano in the middle of the room, but it didn't look like the one in the ad at all. It was old, with some of the wood peeling off. Some piano keys were missing, and it was way smaller than I thought it would be. I told him it wasn't what I was expecting. I tried to be nice, but I guess he could hear that I was let down. He said he was sorry it wasn't what I wanted. He just stood there with his arms crossed, watching me. I felt really uncomfortable, like I was trapped. The whole thing was just too strange, and I knew I had to get out of there. I said thanks, but no thanks to the piano. The man, still leaning on the wall with a weird smile, asked if I wanted to see anything else. I said no. I was good. I was really nervous and just wanted to leave. I rushed out of the room and back to the dark hallway. I found the stairs and quickly went up them, getting out of the building. Even though I was out, I still felt really creeped out. Maybe it was the way the man, John, looked at me or acted, or just how he spoke. When I got home, I looked up the address on my computer. It showed a picture of the old church, saying it was a music museum open only on weekends. I couldn't find anything about them selling stuff. I felt really scared and closed my laptop. I think I had just avoided something really bad. I was always a bit wary of sites like Craigslist, but after that, I stopped using them completely. I haven't used Craigslist or even Facebook Marketplace since that night. It's like you're risking your life for some secondhand stuff. So don't use Craigslist, and if you do, Always be careful. After I moved to a new town, I needed someone to live with in my apartment. I went on Craigslist to find a roommate. That's where I found a guy named Jack. We sent emails and talked on the phone, and he seemed nice. We decided to meet and talk more. Jack was around 30 years old and seemed friendly. We chatted about our hobbies, and he told some funny stories about people he lived with before. But then he got serious and said he needed to tell me something important. He told me he sleepwalks a lot, and it's pretty bad. I didn't think it was a big deal and told him it was okay. The first weeks with Jack were good. We got along fine. But then weird things started happening. Food went missing and things were moved. I thought maybe Jack was sleepwalking, but I didn't worry too much. Then one night, I heard a weird noise from Jack's room. It sounded like he was talking to himself, but then it turned into a scary growling noise. I quietly went to his door and listened. The growling got louder. I opened the door a bit and saw Jack standing there with his eyes shut. It was really weird and scary, like I was seeing something I shouldn't. I decided to go back to my room and not say anything. The noises stopped after a while. The next day, Jack acted like nothing happened. I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to make him feel bad. He seemed normal, so I just forgot about it. A few more days passed, and I often woke up to hear footsteps or doors opening and closing in the hallway. Sometimes, I even heard Jack making that growling noise again. I knew it was just him sleepwalking, so I wasn't too scared, but it still made it hard for me to sleep until I heard him go back to his room. One night, I woke up because Jack slammed his bedroom door, which was unusual for him. I lay in bed and watched as his shadow appeared under my door. Then, slowly, he opened my door. Jack stood there in the dark doorway. I was really scared, even though I knew he was sleepwalking. He started growling again. Then suddenly his eyes opened wide and he rushed at me. He pinned me down. His eyes looked empty. He told me in a weird voice to stay still and not move. I tried to get away, but he was too strong. I was really scared. Then suddenly, he let go, walked back to his room and closed his door. I locked my door and stayed up all night. The next morning, I left for work early, before Jack was up. I didn't want to see him after what happened. When I got home, his car was gone. I noticed a lot of stuff missing from the house. Jack's room was empty. I tried to call him, but he never answered. I never heard from Jack again. I don't know why he left. Maybe he felt bad about what happened. But if he was sleepwalking, he wouldn't remember. It still scares me. I stopped using Craigslist because of this. I just hope Jack was really sleepwalking. If he wasn't, I'm worried he might come back someday. I've always loved looking through Craigslist for good deals and discovering unusual stuff you can't get anywhere else. One day, I came across an ad for an old-fashioned record player in great shape. I just had to send a message to the seller to ask about it. Surprisingly, the seller got back to me really fast, and we started talking about the record player. The seller, called Jack, was really nice and seemed super keen to sell it. We planned to meet at his place later that week to finish the deal. When the day came, I went to his apartment complex right on time and headed to Jack's apartment. Right when I walked in, something felt weird about the place, but I wasn't sure what it was. Jack greeted me and I noticed he was acting a bit odd. He was fidgety and looked nervous. I thought maybe he was just a naturally anxious guy. The record player was in even better shape than the photos, which made me happy. Just as I was about to buy it, Jack asked if I wanted to see something really interesting in another room. I was a bit unsure, but I decided to go with him. We went to a room at the back of his apartment. It was crammed with all kinds of stuff, just a weird mix of things. Jack showed me a big trunk in the corner and said there was something inside I might like. When he opened it, a musty smell came out that made my head spin. Inside there was an old worn-out white sheet. I could tell there was something underneath it, but I didn't want to see more. Sorry. That smell was just too much for me. I turned around and started to head back to the front room. Jack stayed by the trunk, urging me to come back for a quick look, promising I wouldn't regret it. But I felt too weird and shaky to stay any longer. I ignored him and hurried out of his apartment, feeling really dizzy and confused. I rushed to my car, stumbling a bit. I barely drove for 20 seconds, just getting out of the parking area when I had to pull over. I felt like I was about to faint, and I guess I did, because I suddenly woke up a few minutes later. I was still dizzy, but I managed to drive a bit more and turned into a side street where I had to stop again because I passed out. The next part is kind of fuzzy. When I woke up, it was getting dark and my mind was all muddled. I couldn't think straight at all. Somehow, I made it home. As the night went on, my head started to clear up. As soon as I could think properly, I called the cops. They went to Jack's apartment, got inside, but Jack said he didn't have any trunk like that, and they didn't find anything. Nothing else happened after that night, but I'm sure something wasn't right. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, and the smell was nothing unusual, but it freaked me out for some reason. I really think there was some kind of drug gas coming from that trunk. If I had stayed any longer, I might not have gotten out of there.